From your first-person shooters to your third-persons to even top-downs, the shooter genre dominates the gaming industry. From gritty, war-torn Call of Duty to crime-infested Grand Theft Auto, there's a first to third-person shooter literally everywhere you go. And even though a lot of people attach the success of the first-person shooter genre to games like Call of Duty, I want to attach the success of the third-person shooter genre to games like Max Payne. Max Payne is a third-person shooter released in July of 2001, made by Remedy Studios but pushed through Rockstar Games. And aside from Grand Theft Auto 3, which was released the same year as Max Payne not only did great, but it was also kind of like the first of its time. Third-person shooters weren't really a thing in 2001. Hell, first-person shooters were still trying to get their feet wet. This might be my lack of console knowledge that was set before the years I was born, but I don't know any third-person shooter that was released before Grand Theft Auto 3 and Max Payne. Any third person that was as popular, I mean. So for Remedy Entertainment to make this game, knowing that the genre that they were going for wasn't exactly popular or looked for, that takes a lot of courage. Now let's get into the story of Max Payne, because aside from being a great shooter, it's an amazing story. See, Max Payne is an undercover cop in New York City. Years before the events of the game, his wife and daughter were murdered by junkies. Said junkies were hyped up on a new drug called Valkyrie. Now, years later, Max is undercover in a crime family who is trafficking said drug. Okay, so this is where the story goes batshit. Max Payne is filled with a whole bunch of plot holes and twists. This is the first twist of the game. So after fighting through a subway station full of mobsters, Max rendezvous with one of his cop buddies, Alex. Said cop buddy gets smoked in the subway station by a mobster, and Max is then framed for his murder. So now, not only is he trying to figure out where the Valkyrie drug comes from, he also needs to figure out who's really responsible for Alex's death, while also trying to clear his name. Now, throughout a good part of the game, Max is now mowing down mobsters throughout different crime families in hopes of getting more information on the Valkyrie drug. Now, the campaign for Max Payne is actually broken up into 3 chapters. Everything I've told you so far, from the subway to Alex dying to him mowing down mobsters, that's all chapter 1. That's filled with Max chasing down mob bosses and mob higher-ups, basically looking for leads for both the Valkyrie drug and Alex's murder. And as crazy as chapter 1 gets, chapter 2 is even more psycho. See, the beginning of chapter 2, he's relatively doing the same shit, looking for leads for Valkyrie, but along chapter 2, him meeting Mona and getting drugged, shooting up a cargo depot full of arms dealers and mobsters, and invading a mob boss's mansion, the story takes another twist because he finds out that all of this is just one big military conspiracy. I don't know if you can tell, but this game confused the fuck out of me as a kid. Come to find out, the Valkyrie drug was some sort of military experiment for super soldiers gone wrong, and then Max's wife somehow found out about it at work. In that part, they hint at it kinda in the game, but I don't take it too seriously because Max was hopped up on V at the time. So that memory of his wife telling him what she heard at work, all that shit could just be the drugs. But it is a basic visualization that shows you why his wife and daughter was killed. Mind you, all of this he learned by finding some military base out in the middle of nowhere. And the mission before that, he was shooting up a mob boss's mansion. The transitions in this game is crazy. Anyways, Max gets the lead on the head of the organization that was responsible for the creation of the Valkyrie drug. That head being Asia, run by Nicole Horn. The final chapter of the game revolves around Max raiding Asia's headquarters and attempting to kill Nicole Horn. Like, Max shoots this building up. He goes through towers upon towers of soldiers, just gunning him down, getting all the way to the top where Nicole tries to flee in a helicopter. Now, obviously, we kill her, alright? We shoot a support beam and the shit hits the helicopter. The game ends on a bittersweet note with Max getting arrested, but avenging the deaths of his family. Something I really love about Max Payne's story is a couple of things, right? Aside from it being a great story, it's one of those games where you have to either really pay attention the first time you play it, or you have to play it twice to get the full story. Like, you cannot look away while you're playing this game. Every comic book panel and cutscene is vital information that can be used to help understand the story. And it does a really good job at keeping you entertained. The second thing I love about the story is how they chose to tell it. Now, obviously, you can see they don't use generic video game cutscenes. They do sometimes, but the majority, if not the entirety of this story, is told through comic book panels. Despite not being based off of a comic book, Max Payne is a comic book game. From the pages to the word panels, everything about this game screams comic book. And even though it kind of looks silly at first, I think it does a great job of telling its story. Obviously, Remedy was on a budget at the time, and I don't think they could afford any high-class value gaming cutscenes. But they did so good with the comic book panels that I can't see this game being done any other way. And in a strange way, it kind of adds to the atmosphere of Max Payne. Max Payne has this weird 1940s detective noir look to it. It feels like I'm playing a detective game that should be in black and white but isn't. From his narration to the music that plays in the background of these comic book cutscenes, everything screams noir. Speaking of his narration, that's the best thing about this game. Gameplay aside, we're gonna get into the gameplay in a minute, but the narration and the voice acting in this game is amazing. Everybody nails it, especially Max Payne. Max gives off these Shakespeare vibes when he gives off his narrations. They're dark and descriptive and poetic at the same time. Like, for example, let's go to chapter 1. Let's go to the beginning. There's a scene in chapter 1 where Max picks up a call. This is after he just got done shooting up a motel. And the call is between a mobster and his boss. And the mobster's telling him, like, yo, Max came through, he shot everybody, we dying. And after the call ends, Max ends it with some cold ass line.
Boss, Cornelia, this is Max Payne. The game started capping us. He killed him.
Are you freaking kidding me? He's just one lousy cop. You better be freaking kidding me. Whack him. What's the freaking problem? Hello? Answer me. Hello?
The word was out. A deadly virus released into the city's corrupt circulatory system. Something wicked this way comes. Max Payne at large.
Dark, descriptive, poetic. This is what I mean when I say that. That line, something wicked this way comes, Max Payne at large, easily sounds like it could have been out of a poem. And as I said, every character nails the voice acting. You hear how distressed the mobster and the mob boss sound when he's telling him that Max is out there killing him, and the mob boss is like, yo, just kill him, he's just one lousy cop. That's what makes this game what it is. The story for Max Payne is probably my favorite out of any shooter and video game I've played within the last 20 years. To this day, I can't think of a mission, maybe outside of Modern Warfare 2, that's made me feel the way I felt when I first played the Nightmare mission. There's a reason why I didn't bring it up during the summary. I wanted to talk about that mission by itself. So the first Nightmare mission was when Mona drugged him, and while he was being captured by mobsters, Max was dreaming about the night his family was killed. And it's eerie as hell. The voices are distorted. You hear his wife screaming in the background. The hallways is getting bigger, and to make matters worse, this is the worst part about the mission. The shit turns into a maze. Everything goes black and you're just left to follow a trail of blood. Your wife and daughters screaming and crying in the background while you're trying to follow this blood trail in order to get them and save them. See, the game actually opened up with the murder of Max's wife and kid. Max came in, he heard screaming, he came through, he killed the intruders, and he found his wife and kid dead. This mission took that mission and turned it into his own little weird creepypasta version of it. To this day, 22 years later, whenever I ask people, hey, remember that mission from Max Payne? They all say the same shit. Man, that one fucked me up. The storytelling and story itself is perfect. And to top it off, they mixed the great storytelling with great gameplay. Max Payne isn't just your generic third-person shooter. Remember, I told you it's the first of its time. Not only was the gunplay fun, but it also introduced this new mode called bullet time. Basically, Max goes into slow motion while he's shooting at opponents while flying through the air. Think of it as like a Deadeye from Red Dead Redemption, but like an earlier version. But unlike the Deadeye in Red Dead Redemption, the bullet time in Max Payne is a lot more vital. See, you got your health bar to the left, and you can take care of your health if it gets too high with painkillers. But the health transfers over depending on how much you have throughout each mission and each checkpoint. And there's only so much painkillers you can find, so there's times where you're just going through these missions, shooting it out, one bullet away from death. And that's where bullet time comes in. It's a literal lifesaver. You can still die if you get hit, but it takes away the AI's opportunity to kill you at a higher rate. The guns in this game work great. You have the Desert Eagle, you have the Beretta, you can two-wheel the Beretta, or you can just go in single-handedly. You got melee weapons, but them shits is useless. Do not use these, you will die. And you got shotguns, submachine guns, ARs, grenades, Molotovs, all in one little pocket. Now, enemies drop loads of ammo, and you can always find ammo around somewhere in like a crate or a container or a drawer, so you never really have to worry about running out of ammo throughout these missions. And despite coming out in 2001, the gameplay for the gunplay is great. I don't feel like the controls are too clunky, the accuracy seems legit, and there's not much recoil either. A cool aspect about the gunplay is that there's times where it changes depending on where you are. If you're in an open area, handguns, max, ARs. Close quarters and shotguns obviously, but there's times where you're like in tight spaces like the motel or an apartment building or like a tight ass hallway, so you have to be careful with whether or not you peek out your head to shoot. There's times where everything gets kind of claustrophobic, so you have to take a step back so you can get a better visual of what you're hitting at. And it kind of adds a lot more pressure for you to actually think before you shoot. There's no weak links when it comes to the weapons. Every gun in this game feels needed, unlike the melees. As I said, don't use them, you will die. Great story, amazing narration, fun gameplay, 10 out of 10 game in my opinion. Max Payne is definitely one of a kind. If you have the opportunity to play it, I suggest you do. Me, I paid like $6 for it on my PS5. It was worth it. The graphics are slightly enhanced, but all the controls remain the same. And to make matters better, I think they're coming out with a remake, if I'm not mistaken, of the first two games. All rumors so far, so don't take my word for it, but still, that's what I hear. Nonetheless, that's the end of our Max Payne adventure. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of Reggie TV. I really enjoyed revisiting this game. As I said, it was really confusing. You know, like I said, this game confused the shit out of me as a kid. Granted, I wasn't paying attention, but now as an adult, I'm paying attention and I'm seeing certain things that I didn't see before. It all makes sense now, kinda. Also, before I go, like I said in the beginning, this game was made by Remedy. Rockstar was just the distributor. Just putting that out there because a lot of people don't know that. But hey, that's all I got for y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I'm out.